In this video, I'll be talking through how I created this LED dot matrix screen inspired unicorn dither using Dither Boy and then some other software like Photoshop to finish it off. If you want an animated version of this as well, you can use After Effects, but I'll explain the difference later on in the video. If you're unaware of Dither Boy, this is a software that generates effects like this on your images, all fully editable. It's not a plugin either, it's a standalone software, so you don't have to have Photoshop or anything else to run this. We are also adding in free updates like the video update we put out this month, and it's all included in one purchase, so you don't need to like subscribe and you won't ever lose access to the updates because everything we do is just included in one purchase. But if you want to know more, I will just leave a link under the video to Dither Boy and you can read everything else about it there. So to get into it, here I've got a folder with some images that are all the same size, they're all 1080 by 1350. All of these are from Unsplash, which is a stock photo website. I'm going to start with the unicorn one, so I will leave the unicorn linked in the description if you want to follow along with the same base image. And loading up Dither Boy, I am in version 2.0.1. This version, I don't know if this version will go out because we're just testing a bug that was on some certain videos. So you might not get this version, you might get like version 2.1. But for this tutorial, you're just going to need version 2 or higher. So make sure that you've updated. If you're on 1.6 or 1.7, you will have an email with the link to download 2.0 and you can do that, install that, and then come back. So I'm going to go to import and I've got my images here. As I said, I'm going to start with the unicorn. So I'm going to click on that, press open. And then firstly, we're going to just choose the style of dither. Now you can go for Bayer ordered, which is this one, or you can go for Bayer void, which is this one. We're going to do some editing to this. We need to reduce the contrast to get the effect that we want. But I just thought I would mention that Bayer void is actually a dithering algorithm that was written by a guy called Danny Void, who I am working on Dither Boy with, based on the Bayer dithering algorithms. There's a few different Bayer dithering algorithms, but this is his. Obviously that's why it's named after him. So this one's a little bit different to what you might have seen elsewhere. I just thought I would mention him since we're mentioning this in the video. I'll leave his links below as well, but we can go to Bayer void or Bayer ordered for this. I'm going to go for Bayer ordered since that's what I used initially on the unicorn I showed you. If you're curious or want to know the thinking behind this, if we lower the scale a little bit and just lower the contrast and then zoom in here, you can see in these areas where the dithering is more sparse, you've got these evenly spaced squares or pixels that make up the dithering pattern as a whole. Obviously, when the Bayer dither gets to areas with more intense luminosity, like up here near the horn of the unicorn, the pattern changes. But in these low luminosity areas, this is how it looks. Now, that matches what we want because the effect that I'm going for here is that of a LED display or a matrix display. So if you look here, this is just the Wikipedia, just to prove you that I'm not making this up. But on a dot matrix display, you've got a very similar thing going on here where it's made up of dots. Now the spacing of these dots is different obviously to what we've got going on because we're dithering. We're not making a dot matrix effect. It's just inspired by these screens. But the other thing this links in with is just traditional LED displays. So if we click on here, you can see that the LED displays zoomed in look like this. Obviously nowadays they're much more higher fidelity because you've got things like OLED screens. But here it references destination signs and public transport displays. So again, stuff like this is LED. I don't know where this photo's from. It'll say on the Wikipedia, but evenly spaced dots kind of glowing on this bus sign. You've seen it. You go to the train station or bus station or whatever, and you'll have seen these screens. Evenly spaced dots, backlit, or looking like it's glowing, looking like it's emitting light. And all we're doing is being influenced by that. So it doesn't have to be bang on, doesn't have to actually use the same technology. So we can use dithering to generate a similar effect. So I'm going to reset my controls here. I'm going to go back to Bayer ordered. Now, what you need to get this to work for most images is a low scale of like 2 or 3, a low contrast so that there is space between the dots. You don't want high contrast where there's no space between the dots because then it loses the look. So low contrast, slightly higher threshold than usual, And then from there, using your midtones and your highlights, you can just tweak things and sort of fine tune it to your liking. Obviously, you can see there if I pull the midtones down and probably if I pull the highlights all the way down as well, you can still see the unicorn silhouette. This one really leans into the evenly spaced dots effect. But if you didn't know this was a unicorn, like if I stood a little bit back from the screen now, or if we show this to someone who doesn't know what dithering is, they might be a bit confused by this. So what I would like to get out of mine is some dots within the unicorn, but most of the dots out of the unicorn still being quite sparse and just sort of spread out. So I'm going to do my best to get that out of this image. But ultimately, so this tutorial is not like an hour long. I'm just going to go for something like this. Now, on the recording, this looks a little bit weird. So if I zoom in a little bit, you can see what I've ended up with. If you want to get the exact same as me, if you go to extras and click Discord here, what I'm going to do literally right now in the video is go to adjustments, presets. I'm going to save the preset and I'm going to export it. So I'll export first. So I'm trying to get better at using Discord, but you can join. We're going to open it up to more people soon, but I'm going to put the Unicorn Dither preset in the previews tab. You can download that and literally get the exact same settings as me if you want, but you can see them here. Contrast 6, midtones 19, highlights 99, luminance threshold 67, no blur, Bayer ordered, and scale 3. From here, obviously at the beginning of the video, I showed you this folder, which I named wrong. So if you noticed that, then yeah, I named it LCD, which is wrong. Anyway, I've got all these images that are the same size. And that means rather than going through and dithering them all one by one, what I can do is go to batch, select folder, navigate to where I've saved them all. Obviously you can't see any images here because it's just asking you what folder to do the batch dither in. Once you're in the folder you've saved all your images in, if you just press select folder, you get the little pop-up that says it'll process every image in the selected folder that shares the same dimensions as the input image. So all my images in that folder are the same size as the unicorn image. So I can press yes. And all my images have now had this exact dither applied to them. Now, if you're going to use this feature and you've got 8, 9, 10, maybe 20 images, that's probably going to be fine. But if you use this on like 50, 60, 70 images, maybe that'll be fine as well if they're small images. If they're big images and you're going past like 7, 8 or 9, it will crash. Don't try and dither 100 images that are all 5,000 pixels wide using batch dither, unless you've got an absolutely amazing amount of RAM and just an amazing computer. Be sensible with it. I only went for 8 here. Don't do anything stupid. I just have to say that so someone doesn't email me and say they tried to do 1,000 images and it broke or whatever. Anyway, so now I've done that. If I come back here, you'll see there is a batch processed folder. Now, the settings, they've been automatically applied, so they might not be exactly what I wanted. Obviously, you can go through and load in other images and do it manually if you want, but this skull one looks pretty cool. These hands look pretty cool. This floating person looks really cool. We've got a statue here. So there's a few sort of other ones I can work with here. This one of the eye didn't really go well, so I can go and do that manually later. And this hand one doesn't look too good either. So now you've got your dither, you're going to move these files into your software of choice. Now, I'm first going to show you how I would do this in Photoshop. Then I'm going to show you After Effects. If you're working with Affinity Photo or just some other design software, you're going to need a glow or blur effect and the blend mode screen or lighten. So if you've got those, it doesn't matter what you use. So I'm going to import the skull, the unicorn, this statue, this floating 3D human, and these hands into mine, just with a drag and drop. And then holding shift, I'm going to, with my top layer selected, click on the bottom layer and then convert to smart object. And then I'm going to go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, apply any Gaussian blur. And then, in fact, let me just maximize my Photoshop here so you can see things a little bit better. There we go. So yeah, once you've applied a blur, if you come here to smart filters and just click on these dials, you can edit the blending options for your Gaussian blur. So we're just going to change the blend mode to screen. And as you can see now, we've got this little blur on the edges of all the dots now. Probably went a little bit far with the radius. I would go for something a little bit tighter, like 2 pixels for your blur. I'm also just going to make a hue and saturation layer, tick colorize, up the saturation, and I'm going to go for like a nice blue. Obviously go for whatever you want. From here, all I've really done to generate these effects is just stack blurs on top and different like glow effects. So next, if we go to radial blur, and if I set the blur method to zoom up the amount a little bit and pull this blur center sort of up to the right. Unfortunately, you don't get a preview for this one, so you just got to guess a little bit, but I'm going to try and put it sort of near the horn. Press OK, and then again, you're just going to change the blending options to screen, and then you can just keep sort of doing that. So another Gaussian blur. I'm maybe going to turn down the opacity of the radial blur as well, because it's a little bit much. And I'm going to turn down the opacity of the hue as well. Now from here, because you made it a smart object, you can just double click into the smart object, hide the unicorn, or, you know, hide until you've got whichever one you want. Let's say if I apply this to the skull, Control S to save, and come back, and it's applied all the effects again, but to the skull, and you can just go one by one and export like that. Another effect that's not bad, Photoshop doesn't really have any good glow effects, but if you come into filter gallery and go to diffuse glow but turn the graininess down, you can get some nice glow build up around the sort of more dense parts of your dither. They use really weird terminology here, so clear amount is just the threshold for the glow, sorry. So yeah, you can turn that down if you want more, turn it up if you want less. I just go for something subtle, like kind of like this, and then press OK. And again, you can then go and blend the filter gallery however you like to get some nicer highlights in the image and end up with something like this. But I do prefer doing it in After Effects. So I'm going to minimize this and let's open up After Effects. So same deal here. I'm just going to pull in those files to my project tab, pull them into my composition, and we've got them all here now. Then I'm going to right click and make a new adjustment layer. And the first effect I'm going to stack here is Gaussian blur. Change the blend mode of the adjustment layer to screen and just up the Gaussian blur a little bit here. Let me just go back onto the unicorn so you can see what I've got going. Next, on a new adjustment layer, I'm going to pull in a CC Light Burst 2.5. And again, I'm just going to change the blend mode to screen. Using these coordinates where it says center, you can adjust where this sort of generates from, like the point of origin. So again, I'm going to go for somewhere near the horn. As you can see, like this is much better than the Photoshop version of these effects. I don't know why Adobe don't just, like, I don't know why After Effects always gets better effects than Photoshop, but I'm sure there's a good reason. But yeah, from there, adjustment layer, let's do a glow now. And I'll pull my timeline out of the way so you can get a better view of this. And if you lower the glow threshold and up the radius and just sort of experiment, you can get some like much nicer effects out of this. As well, you've added them in the order I added them, I'm assuming, but you can go and reorder these effects so that they interact with each other differently. Obviously, I've not named mine, so maybe name your layers. But yeah, and then from there, we can add in some color using the same method, hue and saturation, pick your color. And again, you can reorder this as well so that it interacts with the effects differently. So if you stack them from the bottom, light burst first, then the Gaussian blur, then the glow, and then the hue and saturation, you can get something like this, which is probably most similar to what I showed at the beginning. The one I showed at the beginning just had tons of these applied to it, really. So like keep blurring, change the blend mode again, maybe lower the opacity of that one a little bit. In your light burst settings, you can change these as well. So you can lower the ray length, or you can reverse the ray length as well, which looks pretty cool. You can lower the intensity or just blast the intensity. You can add a color here, but I wouldn't recommend adding a color here because it looks awful. They've got 3 methods as well for the burst. So you can go for a straight burst. You can see that these look a little bit worse, to be honest, from the dithering dots. You can do center, which does 1 light burst behind and 1 in front of the image, or you can just go for fade, which is my favorite as well. And then as an alternative, if you've got it, you've probably already used it if you've got it, but if you delete the glow and if you've got deep glow for After Effects, this will get you a nice glow without really having to edit any of the settings. But because you batch dithered, now again, you can just enable these other ones and yeah, get the same effect applied with no extra effort really required beyond maybe tweaking things a little bit. So now we've covered the actual dither setup and then the effect setup afterwards, as well as the influences for this effect. If you combine this tutorial with one of the other video tutorials I've done for Dither Boy, then you can get this type of animation out of this effect, which takes it like one step further, because the only difference between this effect and the one I'm just showing on screen is a turbulent noise layer. I didn't cover it in this because I just wanted to cover the actual effect itself. So yeah, it's this video on screen that you'd need to watch and combine the two tutorials to get that kind of effect fully animated out of this type of image. But yeah, now you know how this is put together. Maybe you'll take it further or do something different than what I did with this. If you got Dither Boy, thank you very much for your support. If there's a tutorial you want to see or something you want to learn about Dither Boy or about dithering in general, let me know. As always, more Dither Boy tutorials coming, more updates coming, new features already in the works, and thank you for watching. I hope you found this useful, and I will see you in the next video.